Hey everyone, who is the hardest killer to master in DBD? For this video I'm going to be ranking every killer by how hard it is to reach peak skill with them and how much you'll need to overcome to reach that point too. Let me know your thoughts as always down below and let's get into it. Very easy. Wraith I think is the easiest of the killers to master, and I do think it's by design as well, with him being the entry level character for a lot of people. He's both easy to play and easy to master. His peak mastery really comes in the form of utilizing his speed and ability to body block in stealth, and go with a hit and run playstyle, which is achievable fairly quickly, I'd argue. Legion are next, and another character who are pretty straightforward when it comes to mastery, with them having a pretty simple power and one that has a lot of assisting features like with their mending and tracking. I'd probably say their hardest playstyle to master is playing Legion more as a chase character, but even then I would say it's perfectly learnable in not too long, using their frenzy to vault mid-chase and stuff like that. Demogorgon is another character that is also overall simple and also quite simple to master too, with its hardest mastery aspect probably being to learn all of the possible spots and distances you can use the shred attack at, like around Shack and stuff. Demo as a whole though is also another character who was sort of built to be an introductory character, and therefore its depth isn't as great as many other killers. Sadako may be surprising to see so low, but currently her core playstyle is realistically quite simple and doesn't take much to learn or master, with it essentially being to spam teleport and try to apply Condemned. It's kinda sad this is the case, but this is sort of how it goes, so I'd say currently at least, Sadako is not very hard to master. Easy. Clown is our first killer in this tier, and one which I do think is fairly easy to master due to his core simplicity. He does have complexity though through his bottles and mastering their movement and angles, but largely this is all there is to him and his kit, I'd say. Maya's after his rework I'd also say is pretty easy to master, and his power is super straightforward with how it works, but also with its depth as well. His dash attack is probably one of the more simple and straightforward ones in the game, with it having flexible movement, long duration, and insta-downing. There are some definite mind game tricks to learn with it though, but it's on the simpler end when it comes to mastery. Doctor is also a character who is decently easy to master, with his core learning curve coming in the form of his shock attacks and learning their timing, perfecting how it's used to stop vaults and unhooks and stuff like that. Doctor has also been around for a while though, which does make him easier, admittedly, as there's tons of resources for him, something we'll find is not the case for some characters later on. Bubba I think is definitely debatable as easy to master, as he does have a hard time with the collision on many maps, and mastering him surely includes knowing how to perfectly navigate all of the areas of most maps. With this said though, I do think this is the hardest aspect of him to master, and most of his other areas are decently simple. Ghostface is a character who is weak but also fairly simple and decently easy to master, I'd argue. His main mastery comes in the form of using a stalk, learning angles, and also knowing how to use his power more aggressively in order to apply pressure and make up for his many downsides as a stealth character. Trickster, despite his rework, is still pretty easy to master, I'd argue, as a character who is quite spammy and does have a lot of forgiving aspects when it comes to his aim and even his new rank system, which levels up quite easily with things like long shots. Definitely some more knowledge to learn and master with his new abilities, but largely he's on the easier side, I'd say. Xenomorph is a character whose mastery mainly comes in the form of the tail attack, I think, and its unique movement and ability to essentially bend over objects almost. Being able to use this thing well is a skill that definitely takes time to build up. But also I do think it's a more transferable skill from other killer abilities too, such as Nemesis, who I'd say is also on the easier end of mastery, with the core learning curve being with his tentacle and different skills like dragging it. He also has a bit extra though I think with learning how to utilize the zombies well, and also learning to think on the fly a bit more with them, often acting very bizarrely and so accounting for that essentially. Spirit I also think is on the easier end of mastery, with the main thing you need to learn being her tracking, but this also debatably being one of the only things. If you can get very good with this aspect of her, I'd argue you've basically nailed down the whole character, which is why I do think she's on the simpler end of things. Chucky I also think is on the easier end to master, with him too having a core ability with his dashes which have clear complexity, but I do also think this is the main element of mastery, and most other areas are fairly simple for him. He does have a lot to learn though with how he's able to move with use of vaults, and how he can bend and flip around them. Cross, who despite being newer and lacking information on how to get good with her, is still fairly easy to master, I'd argue, with her having a pretty straightforward power overall, once you get over the initial learning curve at least. She has a lot of transferable skills from other characters, and the core of her mastery I think comes in the form of balancing her regular mode with her head mode, but also the movement of her lunges in head mode too, which are a bit more awkward. Kaneki is going to round off the tier here, and whilst I know people will say he's so easy to play and master, I think this is ignoring the clear difficulty and learning curve with his unique movement and how it slots into the maps of the game. I don't think it requires quite as much accuracy as a character like Blight say, but it does still require a solid amount of time to learn for sure, because it's a very unique ability. Moderate. Knight is a character often viewed as quite easy to play and master due to him having a focus on his AI guards, but these guards and their deployment and also playing around and with them is definitely a unique skill to master in DBD, especially because this isn't really present in any other character or power. Dredge has definite complexity in a number of elements to its power, some of which take a solid amount of time into learning how to use effectively. I think specifically the Remnant is probably the hardest part of the kit and requires the most time to know when to use and around which loops and so on. Dredge does get nice passive buffs which ease its overall difficulty in mastery though with things like Nightfall. Nurse I'm putting here mainly for the typical reason of she's just so unique. Whilst I don't think she's overly hard to play at her core, I do believe she is hard to master. A great nurse looks very different from an average one, even if both can achieve a 4K, fairly easily too. Knowing how the blinks work as a mechanic does take a lot of time to truly master, I think. Oni has complexity, and his mastery largely comes in the form of both his early game and setup, and then also learning how to control his dash as well. The early game is really key for him though, as more than almost any other character, people love to pre-drop against Oni, meaning you have to learn how to pressure and gain hits even with this going on. His dash ability takes time to master too due to how it moves, and how you're able to glide off of objects, and make huge turns or flicks if used well. Houndmaster is a character who suffers a lot due to her bugs and just lack of players, to be honest, but I do think she's perfectly achievable when it comes to mastery, as she's essentially another dash character, only her mastery I'd argue is harder due to having the unique element of her dash being remote instead of direct. Snug's movement is unique and there's a lot of tricks to learn because of that I think. She's also just a bit of a newer character, so there's generally less resources as well. Freddy is a character that last time around I placed him at the lowest possible tier, but since his rework he's gained some definite difficulty and clear elements to master him, particularly with his dream palettes and how to effectively utilize them for damage. Other elements of his power work relatively passively or straightforwardly, but his dream palettes are tricky, and to truly get the most of them takes a lot of practice I think, especially with getting damage like through floors and walls and stuff like that. They can get quite technical I think. Pig is a character with a decent amount to master, and it coming in a few different forms. Pretty much every part of Pig I'd say is fairly complex and takes quite a bit of time to truly get good with. Pig requires a lot of on-the-go thinking based on the current situation, with her traps and ambush being very context-reliant abilities. Knowing how to use them effectively completely changes the flow of the match. Springtrap is a character whose complexity comes largely in the form of his axe, and the strange way it performs with its odd weighting, and how it drives down to the ground when thrown. This creates many situations where you can use it effectively, but it requires acute knowledge of how to bend it over loops, or the specific distance required, and stuff like that. His security doors are pretty straightforward I'd say, but the axe is hard to master for sure. Dracula is fairly difficult to master I think, down to simply the variety of his abilities and making them all function together. More stuff doesn't always mean harder to master, but in Dracula's case I do think it's true, with each part of his kit requiring a different skill, and all of it requiring coordination to work together as well. Vecna is sort of the same deal, but definitely slightly harder to master than Dracula. He too has a kit which is made up of a number of other smaller abilities, but these have a lot more complexity and nuances to them in my opinion, with his very unique abilities to lift pallets or damage based on elevation, and so I do think there's a few more tricks to learn here. Wesker has a relatively straightforward dash power with its straight lines and multiple charges, and where his mastery truly comes into play I'd say is probably his different techs and stuff, and learning how to slide with him on loops and things like that. It's a character too that has constantly evolved in this way over the years, with techs coming and going. Hard. Deathslinger has clear complexity and time to master him due to his spear gun and how there's just so many different places to use this thing or shoot through or just get value from. Whilst this is basically all you need to learn from Slinger, it doesn't mean it's easy. Truly mastering the spear gun I think takes considerable time and work to learn all of the nuances of each and every map. Huntress I'd say is also up here as well, as one of the more complex range characters. Despite her having maybe the most guides and resources out of any of the killers in DBD, she is still definitely hard to master, but I think that's also what draws so many people to her and wanting to play her in the first place. She has clear complexity and requires a lot to truly master. Blight is a character who definitely requires quite a while to master, and it largely comes down to it essentially requiring you to learn the ins and outs of every loop in the game, and how Blight can move between them effectively. Especially with so many loops nowadays just not being that friendly to him with their odd shapes. Blight of course also has lots of similar text to a character like Wesker, where he can slide on certain things, ignoring a bounce to get into a preferable position and stuff like that. All of this takes a lot of time, even if Blight at his core is quite easy to get base value from. Plague is difficult to master sort of for the same reason that she's difficult to play in the first place, which is that she's very unique and specifically her projectile is very different to almost any other in the game with how it flops about. Plague, similar to characters I've previously mentioned too, requires a lot of on-the-go thinking, which simply requires a lot of time played with the character to really nail down and get the hang of. Plague's whole power is sort of like juggling, I'd say. Hag I also want to put here as a character who has quite a lot going on for her. Even if many opt for a more campy playstyle these days, there's lots of thought that goes into trap placement and how to rig up an area effectively. And the mastery comes in, I think, with how much you need to think on the fly with her, and all of the various maps and variations she has for her traps, especially nowadays with the whole game working against her, essentially. Jason is one of our newer characters, and so there's a chance his position does change, and probably does go down a little. However, much like the other ranged characters, his power also requires a lot of precision, and has a ton of potential with the variety of spots or areas to shoot his spikes through. Therefore, it's going to take a while to master him, especially with his added aspects over the other ranged characters with his teleportation mode. Henry or Vecna is fairly new as well, but another character I'd say is definitely quite hard to master. He requires a lot of knowledge after all about survivor movement and prediction, with this being the core of being good with his power. Understanding how survivors move, but also learning case by case for each you encounter. This on top of the precision required when using his ranged attack. Pyramid Head is another case of a loaded kit, and actually quite a hard one to master too, with it all being decently complex piece by piece. The hardest part to master, I'd say, is his ranged attack, which requires a lot of map knowledge and studying of survivors to get really good with, a lot of assuming movement and prediction. Then he also has the completely different hook mechanics with his cages, which can completely alter gameplay. Skull Merchant may be surprising to see so high, but from what I've seen of her at a very high level, she looks really tough to truly get value from, and it doesn't help that there's like 2 people who play her or can play her to this level. She's largely disliked, and so she doesn't get the same love as many others from the wider community. This does, I think, add to the difficulty of her mastery as well, as most people tend to just write her off, I think. Singularity is a character who over the years has become a lot easier to pick up and play, but I think to truly master, I do believe he is still quite tough and hasn't altered too much in this way. While sure, you do have a lot more core pressure nowadays with his faster power, he still requires a ton of map knowledge to truly master him, with all of the possible biopod spots and ability to monitor whole areas. Another character too who requires a lot of on-the-go thinking. Twins 2 is another case of not being overly popular and so not having as many dedicated mains. They're also a case of having quite a bit to master in the way of Victor and his various leap locations, and the possibilities with him in general. There's also their entire unique element, which is that there's 2 of them, and you can be in 2 places at any given time, which means there's a lot to learn, I think, in regard to mastering them. Billy is a character who is famously hard to master with his difficult chainsaw dash and the very precise movement it requires. Where someone like Bubba may need to understand collision, I do think Billy needs to do it in a much more acute way due to the greater speed at which he's moving when doing so. All of Billy's movements are small and precise, and the difference between a decent Billy and one who has the character mastered is truly night and day. Billy is a very tough character to master. Very hard. Trapper is one of the most well-known hard to master but easy to pick up characters, and he's sort of designed this way seemingly as well. There's so much to learn with Trapper with all of the possibilities for trap spots on every map in the game, and then further trying to learn how to pressure often with any tools at your disposal, making the most out of the little you have. But the true core is definitely just the traps. Artist is another character with insane potential, and one with debatably limitless, with her able to damage people technically from almost anywhere on the map at any given time, with few exceptions due to elevation. This means learning prediction with her and how to pressure from near and far is very tough, and takes a lot of time to master, especially with the downsides she has like the locker counterplay. Unknown is next, and a character who is very difficult due to just how unique this character is as a whole, from its bouncing projectiles that inflict splash damage to placing and utilizing its hallucinations. Pretty much every aspect of Unknown is difficult in some way and takes quite a lot of time to get good at, let alone master I think, making it one of the hardest killers to master for sure, with the wild things and angles you can achieve with the UVX. There's like just so many spots you can bounce this thing off. You can also kind of do orbitals and stuff like that. It kind of combines lots of different hard aspects from other characters and rolls them all into one character, so it ends up with Unknown being pretty difficult to master in my opinion. Pinhead is going to be my number one though, as a character who is just so unique in almost every way he functions, leaving almost no transferable skills from other killers. His box mechanic takes time to learn and get good with due to the way the box functions and spawns, and also with not always relying on perks like Lethal Pursuer. Then there's his ranged chain shot, which is tough to aim and learn how to use it effectively and actually gain value from it. The chain shot I do think is the key thing. The closest comparison we can probably make is to Nurse's Blink, which has a similar marker point, but even this isn't really comparable because obviously Nurse is blinking to the point, whereas Pinhead is shooting from it. So it makes the whole mechanic very different, very unique, and just not really transferable from any other power, especially with its super sensitive movement and ability to fly a pretty long distance as well. So yeah, Pinhead is tough. Alright, well, there we go. As always, let me know your thoughts down below. I don't claim to be a master at all these characters, obviously. This is just my thoughts from what I do know and from what I've seen around from far better players than me. If you feel like you've mastered one of these characters, be sure to let me know your thoughts. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.